I'm Phil Gale. Welcome to the programme. We begin with fresh hopes of a ceasefire and release of hostages in Gaza. Hamas says it is studying a new three-phase proposal put forward by international mediators following talks with the Israeli side in Paris. The White House says progress is being made, but Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ruled out any military withdrawal from Gaza or mass release of Hamas prisoners.
I
hear comments about all sorts of deals, so I want to make it clear. We will not end this war without achieving all of our goals. This means the elimination of Hamas, the return of all our abductees, and the promise that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. We will not pull the IDF from the Gaza Strip, and we will not release thousands of terrorists. None of this will happen. What will happen? Absolute victory.
Well, our correspondent Tania Kraemer in Jerusalem told me more about the diplomatic efforts to secure a ceasefire.
Well, we understand that there is a framework that's being worked out. There was a meeting in Paris on Sunday. The heads of the CIA and the Mossad and the mediators from Qatar and Egypt were meeting there. This kind of framework, as it's reported, could see a temporary ceasefire with some of the Israeli hostages that remain in Gaza being released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli prisons. But there are a lot of mixed messages coming out, and, you know, depending on which report you're reading, the gaps between the two sides, Israel and Hamas, are either wide or narrowing. Hamas has said that they want to see a full withdrawal of Israeli forces and also a full stop to the hostilities before they will release any hostages. We understand one of the Hamas leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, who's one of those abroad, will be traveling to Cairo to discuss the proposal. But we also heard mixed messages from the Israeli government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a speech given in an Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank that that the reports are untrue, that Israel will release thousands of terrorists, as he said it, speaking to that particular audience. He also has a lot of pressure from his far-right coalition partners who have said if this is a bad deal, they will quit the government, basically. But there is a lot of pressure in Israel from the public. They say the time is really running out for those hostages remaining in Gaza, and that the government has to come to some kind of agreement to bring those hostages back home.
Tania Kraemer in Jerusalem. Well, meanwhile, Israel's military says it has killed 3 members of what it described as a terrorist cell at a hospital in the occupied West Bank. Israel's repeatedly targeted the city of Jenin in recent months. The Iran-backed Islamic Jihad group said 2 of the men killed belonged to its armed wing. Hamas confirmed the other was one of its members. Many countries classify Hamas as a terrorist organisation.
Israeli forces storm a hospital disguised as medics and Palestinian civilians. This, the aftermath of the shooting of 3 members of Palestinian armed groups. The hospital's director described what happened.
At 5:30 a.m. this morning, the occupation special forces sneaked into the corridors of the hospital. They sneaked into the courtyards from the northern and southern entrances. They were disguised in nurse uniforms, doctors and civilian clothes. They sneaked into the 3rd floor. They rang the bell and the door was closed. They rang the bell to enter the department.
Israel said the men were planning to carry out an attack and that this is another example of the cynical use of civilian areas and hospitals as shelters and human shields by terrorist organisations. Al-Qassam, the military wing of Hamas, claimed one of the dead. Palestinian Islamic Jihad said the other two men were members of their militant group. The hospital where Tuesday's operation took place is located in the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The facility is just over 1 kilometre from Jenin refugee camp, where more than 10,000 displaced Palestinians live. Israel regularly carries out raids in the camp, which is known to house members of militant groups. The United Nations says more than 360 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces or settlers in the occupied West Bank since the Hamas terror attacks on October 7th.